Hi, my name is Brad Utter. I'm a senior historian and curator here at the New York State Museum. Enterprising Waters, New York's Erie Canal exhibit to talk about our featured artifact, an Erie Canal warehouse windlass. Now, what is a windlass? That's a great question. And you didn't even have to ask because I knew you were thinking it. Here's a model of a windlass, which is essentially a hoist. And it is a wheel and axle that provides a mechanical advantage. So if you watch here, if I pull the rope, the load there, the freight is going up, and the freight on the other side is going down. And then we could do the other way. Now, the way this would work inside of a warehouse is like this. The windlass is built into the attic of the structure, and then the rope passes through the floor, and it's here where someone can pull on the rope and raise and lower freight. Our particular windlass has a boom and a pulley on each side of the building. So you've got one side that caters to the canal and one side that caters to the yard, so to speak, where a wagon can pull up. But here you see one person pulling on the rope and raising a barrel from the canal boat, and with a hook, a pike pole, they can pull it in and store it here in the warehouse. This is an example of a canal warehouse, and what's neat is this here, you can see the men, here's a blow up of it, and you can see two men pulling on the rope and a gentleman there who is most likely the forwarding agent, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. But they are pulling a rope that goes all the way through the building up to the top floor where there is most likely a windlass. And that's how the windlass would turn. So if we'll back up and we'll take you a little bit behind the scenes as we go up and take a close look at our windlass. And bear with us as we climb over exhibit barriers. This whole structure was recreated by our exhibit staff to mirror the inside of the building where this windlass came from, which was in the village of Mohawk, in the Mohawk Valley, right across the Mohawk River from Herkimer. And as we switch cameramen, women and man, there we go, we'll take you back to see a close shot of the windlass itself. The wheel is approximately 14 feet across, and the axle is about 10 feet across, and we've calculated a mechanical advantage of 20 to 1, meaning that one person can lift 20 times what they would without the windlass. As you're seeing the rope here, you can see how it's guided through by the metal guides, and that keeps the rope in place. And here you can see the rope too. You'd have a person pulling on the rope, maybe on the floor below, but sometimes even on this floor. And what's pretty neat about our windlass here is that there's also a brake, a friction brake. There's a hole here for a rope that would have gone through the floor for the people below who are operating the windlass, or if you're right here, you can pull it down to slow down the wheel. You can imagine if you have weight on one side that the wheel would be pulled pretty hard in one direction, so you may need to brace it as we're going forward. Okay. Up above you can see the booms where the chain crosses rollers that go out to the side of the building. This is all the dark wood you see is original and the lighter wood is what we had to recreate, or what we used to recreate the structure of the building itself to hold it up. Okay. And so we'll work our way back out of the exhibit. One thing that's neat here, if you want to look at this, this is our barrel conveyor. This was also in the warehouse, and we've got it set up to hold barrels, but this could have been used to roll barrels into a boat, or to tie down barrels on top of a boat. We don't know exactly what this was used for, but we believe it was used to load barrels into the boat, as opposed to being on a boat. So let's go over. Okay, we're going to do our switch here. This lovely painting is on loan from the Schenectady Historical Society, and in here depicts this as a warehouse where you could have seen a windlass inside, also over here.
And we have a question: how much does it weigh?
Oh boy, I don't know how much it weighs. We did have to put it back together, and I'll talk a little bit about that. How did we get this is a good question. And in 1971, the town of German Flats owned the building that this was in, and they were going to take it down to build a new highway department. And so they invited in the New York State Museum to look for artifacts, and luckily they found this windlass fully intact. The building had a long history, most likely built around 1830, and the windlass built shortly thereafter. And it had a few different businesses as it lived throughout its life until it was taken down in 1971. But the curators went in and found multiple artifacts, including this long pole, which was called a push pole. It's over 14 feet long, and that would have been used to push boats either off the side, or many other reasons. I can see them using it to reach up to the pulley to make sure that the rope is, or the chain is on the pulley properly. And we have multiple other things. And one of the great things that they found was a set of documents. And using the documents, I've been able to figure out what exactly happened or what kind of business was going on in the warehouse, and the name, in fact. So what we learned is that it was called the H.G. Root and Company, and they were multifaceted. They had many different businesses, but their main business, especially in relation to the windlass, was they were forwarding agents. And a forwarding agent is much like a middleman between the producer and a consumer. So every little community along the canal had multiple warehouses, if not just one, but usually multiple ones. And oftentimes you think of, when people think of the Erie Canal, they think freight got on in Albany and went to Buffalo and that was it. But really all the towns along the route were benefiting from the canal, and they needed warehouses to hold and store goods and prep them for delivery. So in many ways, it's actually like Amazon today, where they had multiple things inside the warehouse ready to ship. If you needed something, they could get it for you, and they would arrange to have products bought and sold, and shipped all around. This is the building here that the windlass came out of, and the hook would have come down under this awning and almost directly over the boat so that you could raise and lower goods from the boats. Here's another image in the 1890s where they're trying to deepen the canal, and you can see here's that overhang where the boats could pull up.
How deep was the canal?
At different times, but the original canal, 4 feet deep, and then later 7 feet deep, and then they were trying to go to 9 feet, and eventually in the barge canal today, it was a minimum of 12 originally, and then it went a little deeper up to 14.
And where did the museum store the Windlass for 50 years?
Okay, good question. So I left off of that story, but when the curators went and saw the Windlass, they had to dismantle it because, as I had mentioned, it was built right into the structure of the building, and they had to dismantle it and cut the wheel in half. And when they did that, they took it to our warehouse for long-term storage. And when we were planning the exhibit, we weren't sure that we could even get it back together because it had, sat for so long, and wood tends to change shape. Luckily, with our production staff, we were able to figure out a way to keep the integrity and put it back together, and it's really great. It's exciting to see it in this setting. Anything else? I'll tell you a little bit about the forwarding agent. As I said, he served as the middleman, and communities along the route of the canal also started to boom, and they had boom towns, but they needed ways to ship their goods. And in order, if you were a cheese farmer near the village of Mohawk, not a cheese farmer, but a dairy farmer and producing cheese, if you needed to ship your cheese to New York City, you could do that through the forwarding agent. And we've got many invoices and receipts that shows that the dairy farmers were using H.G. Root and Company to ship cheese to New York City and sometimes west. They also owned a few boats. They would contract with boats, and they shipped everything from an entire household. One person was moving out to Western New York and contracted with them to ship all of his household goods on the canal, to rum, to fish, to anything that was on the canal. The forwarding agents would have their hands on. And you could also, let's say you were a blacksmith in the village of Mohawk, and you didn't have room in your shop to keep all the iron that you needed. Well, H.G. Root could help you, and what they did was they purchased in bulk the iron that the blacksmith would need, and then the blacksmith would either buy it from them, or the blacksmith could buy it originally and just store it there and come get it as they needed. And that was common with multiple different industries. But the Roots, because they're also competing with other warehouses in town, they diversified. And they had a maltery business where they're they're malting barley, and they also had a general store, and they were partners in a few boats and a couple other businesses. So they really wanted to spread things out to make sure they had a constant flow. And when I say they, it was essentially two brothers, H.G. Root and his brother Elias Root. And they ran the company and did lots of different things. And we have a book, a catalog, that covers everything in the exhibit and also more on our feature artifact and H.G. Root and Company, which you can get on Amazon. It's from SUNY Press, and full color pictures and all the images that you see in the exhibit, everything and more, things that were not able to get into the exhibit, things that were cut. So I encourage you to check out that book and learn more about the Erie Canal and the Windlass, of course. Any questions?
We did have another question. Why were they constantly trying to make the Erie Canal deeper?
Well, the Erie Canal was a tremendous success right from the start when it opened, as far as shipping was concerned, and there were already long lines at the locks because there were so many boats. And so they started an enlargement, 1836, and the goal was to make bigger boats to carry more freight. And shortly thereafter, you see the appearance of railroads. And the railroads at first were complementary to the canal. They kind of took over the passenger traffic, but they would bring goods from outland, from places that didn't connect with the canal. because the canal could still carry more freight. And as railroads, as the locomotives got stronger and you get Bessemer steel, they could start carrying more things and they were faster. So they started carrying more and more goods. And so there's this constant competition between the canal and the railroad in the 19th century for goods. But the canal opened up the Midwest, today's Midwest. And so there was plenty of grain especially, but plenty of products and freight to be shipped. And toward the end of the 19th century, the railroad really started taking over and had a majority of the freight. And so the canal commissioners, and not the canal commissioners, but the people in charge of the canal were trying to decide, how do we compete with railroads, because we want to keep the monopoly of Midwestern goods coming to New York City. And the railroads were privately owned, and the canal was owned and operated by the state. So the state could control prices and control freight tolls, but the railroad, they controlled their prices. So it was a little back and forth, and ultimately the state's response was to build the barge canal, which is the canal you see in operation today. And it was always in a constant effort to move more things faster. Any other questions? No? All right, thanks for spending some time with us. Hope when we open up you can come back and see it in person.